Yeah, well, yes, you're right. Sub A, along with a number of people who we finished with in matric. I suppose memories are really become much more sharply into focus the higher up the standards we got. So junior school, little snapshots of memory. Felt that in many instances the teachers were not up to measure. There were some very strange men, if you like, I think that taught us in the higher standards of junior school. But I mean, I suppose, well, we all survived, clearly, but in some instances, I suppose only just, with probably maybe even some mental scars for some people. It didn't happen to me, but I could see how it could affect people. Potentially, probably borders to more of a degree than us day boys. I have some little vivid memories which are quite weird. There's one thing, or a couple of things. One of them is, do you remember Miss Williams? She was a stand-in teacher for somebody somewhere along the line, I think, and I was fascinated by the sticky tape that held her glasses together. I always remember that the one corner of her glasses had this sort of big wadge of sticky tape, and why didn't you get new glasses? I thought to myself. But anyway, so that's something I remember. My eldest brother Terry, he went to SACS, so he's 10 years older than I am. He matriculated, I think, in 63 or 62, I'm not sure, right about there. And he was one of the first people when the school moved across to Newlands. I think he was in St. George's prior to that. I can't remember when that year was, but anyway, he spent the last I think all his high school actually at the Newlands campus. Yeah, and I mean, I think he was a contemporary of the late Peter Canty, Michael's eldest brother. Yeah. It was very distinctly different to high school, well, pretty obviously, because we were older and had different experiences. But I can't say it wasn't necessarily an enjoyable experience. There are some flashes of good times. Miss Barnack sitting on the floor with the piano accordion. I liked Peter Henschel very much. I thought he was a great guy. Got dragged to death, but a real gentleman, I found him. And opposed to him, there were others who were clearly not in the same camp, and sort of really narcissistic people, in a sense, which I think could have made people's lives very complicated. So yeah, it's not in comparison to high school, which I really did enjoy. Junior school was perhaps, it was a good few marks lower, if you like. I don't remember their first names at all, really, but Oosthuizen was a guy who I really had absolutely no time for. I thought he was a really horrible man. Van Niekerk, Van der Merwe. A lot of people didn't like James Warner. I didn't actually have an issue with him. I got on fairly well with him. I was in his class in Standard 3. But I mean, I could see the other side of him quite clearly, but I didn't fall on that side. But I understood him to be quite an unpopular man in many ways. Well, I think for me, it became more enjoyable as the years went by. Standard 6 and 7 were, I remember them, and they were quite pleasant experiences. I didn't have a real issue anywhere along the line with them. I know the one or two people had issues with a couple of the teachers, but I didn't have really a problem. And I found that actually the more you did at school, certainly the higher up the standards you got, the more you got out of it and the more I enjoyed it, which is probably why, as you say, I actually met a lot of different people because I did a lot of different things extramural in school. I think things started to become really enjoyable when we hit Standard 8 and we did the one-act play competitions. I was in Shaw House and with late Terry de Jong and Dave Atwell and Mike Canty and a number of those players we had a lot of fun in. The first one I recall very clearly, I think it was called A Thread of Scarlet, and Ralph Kelly directed it. And Stephen Brimmercombe drove us to rehearsals in a Mini that had no clutch. So every time he wanted to change the gear, he had to turn off the ignition. Yeah, I don't think my parents were aware of this because we were still fairly young at the time. But yeah, I know living down the road from you, you're fairly familiar with Steve Brimmercombe as well. Yeah, interesting guy. Yeah. We did that in Standard 9. It was called Refund. I think it was by a guy called Fritz Corinthi, I think. Never really heard of him, but it was about a guy who goes back to his school after completing a few years back and claims he hasn't learned anything, and he demands a refund for his education. And yeah, we had a great deal of fun. We used to rehearse on stage at lunchtimes, and how we ever got through rehearsals, I don't know, because most of the time we were just lying on the floor in stitches of laughter, because Mike Canty and Dave and Terry de Jong, trying to remember some of the other guys in it, but we had a lot of laughs. You remember that very clearly. Yeah, it was I think something that I really clicked into and enjoyed a lot. Yeah, and then Standard 9 we also did the first. Yeah, it's it. Yes, my Gallon Crew. Good morning. Yes, that was also a great deal of fun. Yeah, a very interesting experience. I think learning to discover that you can sing a bit, and putting all the bits and pieces together, from singing, dancing, acting, and so forth. Dancing to a very limited degree, I must say, but some nevertheless. Yeah, it was an interesting, enjoyable experience. And funnily enough, with that, not so much as that now, but certainly in a trek when we did the other GNS gondoliers, saw a completely different side of Doug Brown, who would, at after parties, would have you pick up a guitar and play and sing, and would have you quite a chalk and cheese kind of person, really, in many ways.
Why was it only with the gondoliers that emerged?
I think probably because we were in matric at that stage, and but he was a bit more relaxed about it. I also had, funnily enough, quite a lot of contact with him, because not only was he an English teacher, but also he was my rugby coach in the second team. He was the athletics coach. And also, funnily enough, I ended up in his Masters League cricket team. So yeah, we had quite a bit of contact. And yeah, and then in 1972, we did HMS Pinafore. I had the role of Captain Corcoran, and Johnny Tyfield, who was a year ahead of us at the time, was the Admiral. Terry de Jong was Dick Deadeye. It's a good cast, a lot of fun. I don't remember. I think it could have been in that show. I remember there was all the boys were girls. The girls' chorus were little boys, and we had an old age home coming to one of the dress rehearsals, and they didn't realize that the young ladies were in fact young boys, because they looked, totally female-like on stage. And so at interval, a couple of the elderly gentlemen went to relieve themselves, and were absolutely shocked to see a whole lot of women, young ladies, rush up to the urinal, throw the skirts over their heads, and have a pee. I think they had to sit in the bus afterwards. Couldn't get to the second half. But yeah, and then of course there was Walter Swanson, who was the conductor. Terry used to do a wonderful impression of Walter Swanson, sort of sliding off his piano as he got more pissed during the show, because they had a little truck, and his orchestra had a bar in the back. So at half time, they'd go outside and open the bar, and there was this whole rows of bottles and glasses and whatever. And half time, interval, they used to have a good few toots. And so the second half was considerably faster than normal. So the finale of Act 1, rather Act 2, was almost quite often unsingable at that speed. But anyway, the audience got out early. I really don't know. It had been a bit of a tradition at SACS. It wasn't the first time. I remember my brother was in Pirates as well, and we didn't do Pirates. They did Pirates. Terry and Peter Kenty's here, and where the girls, the young female chorus, was standard 6 or 7 boys. So I don't know, some kind of I wouldn't say it's a tradition necessarily, but it had been done in the past, I suppose, to give those boys an opportunity to perform. Otherwise at that age they would have probably been left out of the show entirely. So there was probably a more practical reason as well. Yeah. So by the time it finished matric, the acting and performing bug had really bitten, and it was what I wanted to do, and I went on to study acting. And you're quite young really to get involved in sort of big and sort of mainstream theatre, but I did it as a profession, acting, some directing, broadcasting, quite a lot of teaching for about 10 years. I think the first professional production I was in the Space Theatre in the days of Brian Asprey and Yvonne Bryceland. We We did a play whose name now slips my mind, but we had a really lovely cast, and it was my first sort of professional production. Hilary Gasson, Greta Fox, Keith Grenville, some really good names. It was a great experience. In fact, that I've learned more doing that one play directed by Mavis Taylor than all the years of studying anything, because she was a brilliant director and they were really good performers. And all of a sudden you had to pull up your socks to perform and act at that level. So, I mean, that was a really, really good experience.
When was that, Graham?
I think it was about 75, 6. So I would only have been about 19, 20. Yeah, it really was. And I mean, they were very kind and very helpful. And as I say, you learned a huge amount from them, from their role modeling, so that was great. And then sort of simultaneously, as I said, I suppose for about 10 years I did that, earning my income from it, teaching and what have you. But eventually there were so few performing opportunities in those days, unless you were part of the almost part of the Brabant, to be perfectly honest with you. KPAB was a closed door. It was the only place that really you could get contract work. The space was, you would bumble along potentially from one show to the other. And so I decided to, okay, well, let's see if we can find an alternate career. So as it happened, I went into finance. I spent a lot of time in various roles at Old Mutual. In fact, then in the latter part of my life, I did quite a lot of contract work with them, and really only retired from them in 2017. So that's about 4 or 5 years ago. Although I did lots of other bits and pieces in between. But simultaneously, I've kept up theatre, community theatre a lot, although we've done some really big shows at Harpscape, particularly the Cape Town Gilbert and Sullivan Society. So I mentioned Johnny Tyfield earlier, him being the Admiral, and so he joined the Gilbert and Sullivan Society before I did, and he said, come along, it's a lot of fun. And so I did, and the first show we did was, I think it was Ilanthi, that was in the latter part of 1976. And so we were both in the chorus, which was a lot of fun. And we laughed our way through a large part of that production. Once again, the orchestra was a large part of the entertainment. There was a lady it's like a 3-piece. They didn't have an orchestra at the time because they couldn't afford it. So it was a piano, I think it was a bass and some other percussion, and maybe 1 or 2 winds. But anyway, there was a lady who played the organ on this, and she was a large lady who had particularly large bingo wings. As she played the organ, they wobbled backwards and forwards. And again, the finales of these shows sometimes get totally out of hand, where the chorus and the musicians vie to who's going to take the lead. And this particular finale of Act 1, the orchestra took the lead, and this poor woman had to try and keep up speed. And Johnny Tyfield turns to me and she says, look, she's got a speed wobble on her organ. So that was us. We actually had to turn around and walk off stage because we just simply couldn't finish it. But theatre has brought some wonderfully funny memories. They started really just doing Gilbert and Sullivan only, but then we branched into musicals. We moved away from the Claremont Civic Centre to the Baxter, to the Artscape Theatre, and then to the Artscape Opera House. And in the latter years, I suppose, since about 2005, we had been doing regular musicals in the Opera House. I've been in quite a number of them. Guys and Dolls, Annie, played Warbucks, Daddy Warbucks in Annie. The Opera House, I played Doolittle and Fair Lady. Played Head Deadfiler in Sound of Music. Quite a number of roles, and that was a great experience. Also a lot of fun, but a bit more serious, because that sort of, in that environment, the audiences don't have any idea that you're not fully professional. Everything is professional, apart from the performers who don't get paid. But I mean, we have a full orchestra, like the Cape Town Symphony Orchestra, and all the designers and costume makers. Those are all professional people, but it's just that's the performers who. But I mean, it's one's choice, Everybody else who does that has got a 9-to-5 job, and so the financial side is not so important. And there's a lot of very talented people in Cape Town who made a choice rather to earn a living that way than on the stage. who could have been professionally on the stage at that point in their life if they wanted to be. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's not well enough recognized, you know, the whole arts, and particularly now in Cape Town, in theatre generally in South Africa, in professional theatre, there is virtually no leadership, and a lot of the guys who are getting trained, and some friends of mine, sons and what have you, or daughters who are extremely talented people, have now had to find work on cruise liners and that kind of thing, which is a great pity. So anyway, we're trying to do something about it. But
now you're actually doing something about that.
Yeah, we are trying to. We've got the sort of the roots of a professional company together, but the venues are quite complicated to get. There's a lot of politicking at Artscape and grandstanding and what have you. But there's not really a great understanding of what commercial theatre requires, which is decent length, runs, and all of those kind of things to be able to pay people. And there's a lot of people who would love to find work and be paid. And there's some extremely talented people, but there's a lot of interference, and it's a great pity. So we're trying to see if we can get a new theatre built somewhere, but that's taking some time. But hopefully we'll be successful one day. Yeah. Well, yeah, I mean, I think there's some other complexities, but you'll find now that, I mean, the main impresario in South Africa for some time has been Peter Turin, who is nearly 80 and hasn't got a great deal of energy left. And even he is only doing very low risk, small cost productions at Artscape, because the runs had to be quite small, so you can't get a return on your investment. Many of those people have to take shows overseas afterwards to be able to earn a return, which is actually really not necessary. It could be done locally. But yeah, so there are some issues to overcome, but hopefully we'll try and get there. But it's taking a lot of time. You know.
Cool. And family.
Yes. Well, you met some of them quite recently, in fact. Yes. Okay, cool. Yeah, so I got married. I've been married more than once, but I got married in 1984, I think it was. And I have 3 children from that marriage. And all 3 of them are living in Australia at the moment. 2 in Adelaide, 1 in Melbourne. They've been there varying lengths of time. And as you know, we were there with Leslie, our current wife, very recently, because our oldest daughters got married. 1 grandson, Thomas, who's a lovely little boy who I met for the first time thanks to COVID. We were about to travel or plan a journey, but that couldn't materialize. But yeah, really recently we had a lovely time. Obviously, thank you so much for coming down to Melbourne to spend a bit of time with us. That was great. Yeah, kids all settled in Australia, which I'm very happy for them. I'd obviously like to be a bit closer to them, but it's the way things pan out. At least they're all in one country, which is one. I know some families who've got kids on many continents, which makes it very difficult to get around the block to see them all. So in one way, we're fortunate, and I suppose the most important thing is they're all gainfully employed, they're all doing well, they're all fairly happy. Yeah, well, everybody has a few knocks in life, so that's but there's some good lessons in that for them too. So yeah, I can be grateful that they are who they are and where they are, I suppose. Yeah. Yes. Yeah. Look, I mean, I suppose one name comes up all the time amongst many, and that would be John Ince. I think John was a very big influencer on my life. I had a lot of contact with him because I don't think we were able to join the band until Standard 7, as far as I can recall, but I know I did join Standard 7, and there was a junior and a senior band. And although he wasn't in charge of the junior band at the time, he was an overall overseer. He was also a history teacher for a long time, involved with sport. But I suppose I got the most contact with him in the band. In the senior band, I played the bass drum from grades are, because my kids went through Standard 8 and 9, and then I was the drum major in matric. We had a lot of fun doing that, a lot of time spent doing our drills and so on and so forth. I remember one in particular when I think it was in the junior band in 1971, when we did, I think you were there as well, when we joined forces with all the other bands. And what is that guy's name? Setscorn or something. I think he came in And yeah, he told Giles Heifer his hair's too tall, if I remember correctly. Anyway, yeah, and we had this very complicated maneuver on, it was then still the Goodwood Showgrounds. And there was the Rondebosch band and the Bishop's band and the SACS band, Weinberg, and we all marched up to one end and turned around and had to go off another formation. I remember it was a complete cock up because we all ended up in mixed bands. We marched off with half the Weinberg band, Rondebosch band marched off with the Bishop's band. We had to stop and start again. So yeah, it was very funny. I think he was sincerely interested in who you were and your life and where you were going. He didn't give it, he didn't sort of gloss over things. He was deeply interested in each individual boy's life, where they were going, their family, what difficulties they might have been going through, what difficulties they had at school. And his interest was very, very genuine. I think that was one of the key things for him. And he took a lot of time over that. There were some other staff members who did as well, but he was pretty much key in that. Another person I really enjoyed a lot, and I in fact still see him occasionally, is Louis Knutzer. Louis was a big influencer in a very interesting sort of way. Very funny. I mean, his wit was amazing, and he was also deeply interested in people, but in quite another sense. You know, he would rip people off, but in a hell of a nice way. I remember Digby Coleman. For some reason, he had a very deep interest in Digby Coleman, in a nice way. I mean, he was never nasty, Louis, but I remember he used to, if we used to come to, on Cadet Day, which I think was a Wednesday, you used to come to school, or you could come to school in your cadet uniform. And I remember every Wednesday, Louis would look up at Digby Coleman and say, Digby, waarom lyk jy so militair vandag? And so he could never, he'd never resist an opportunity of saying something, but nice. He was never nasty. He was a lot of fun. Terry Marsh, I enjoyed a lot. Tony Thurman. And I got on well with Doug. Doug is, I know a lot of people didn't like him. A lot of people, I mean, he was a bit over the top very often, but I had a lot of contact with him, and I could see the up and down side. There's something he said once at school. I can't remember. It's a quote from somewhere, which I often think of as, what is this life if so full of care I have no time to stand and stare? And often, if I am feeling particularly stressful or hurry, if I'm rushing through the forest to walk my dog before getting back to do something, I think, you know what, actually let's just stop and look around and take in the scenery, and that quote comes to mind. So yeah, he had quite a big influence in many ways, particularly, I suppose, because of his involvement with the theatre. Mm-hmm. Yes, Ralph in a very quiet way, but yes, from a choir point of view, because we did choir, well, all the practices beforehand, before school, I stayed for the Christopher Brown concert, memorial concert, I was involved quite often, and teaching the singing, obviously, in all the GNSs. So yeah, quite a lot of time with him. I've seen him. He was involved in theatre. In fact, I think Ralph Kelly's still alive, because I used to see him quite regularly driving around in Rondebosch with his cloth cap and coat on. He was also a member of one of the other local drama societies. I haven't seen him, I don't think, post-COVID, but until then, he was fairly active. But yeah, quiet person, but a good man. Yes, Ralph in a very quiet way, but yes, from a choir point of view, because we did choir, well, all the practices beforehand, before school, I stayed for the Christopher Brown concert, memorial concert, I was involved quite often, and teaching the singing, obviously, in all the GNSs. So yeah, quite a lot of time with him. I've seen him. He was involved in theatre. In fact, I think Ralph Kelly's still alive, because I used to see him quite regularly driving around in Rondebosch with his cloth cap and coat on. He was also a member of one of the other local drama societies. I haven't seen him, I don't think, post-COVID, but until then, he was fairly active. But yeah, quiet person, but a good man.
Do you want to say anything about Terry?
Terry Leong. Yeah, I mean, well, everybody knows by now that Terry passed away. It will be 10 years this December. Time just flies. Yeah, I mean, he and I were really great friends at school. in many instances, just after school. And I know he went through a very rough time in the army, but we really clicked as good friends. We worked very closely together on that one act play we did in Matric, us and them. And we had so many regular holidays together. I think you were part of it, the sort of the blowing up the toilet episode at Baines Kloof and various others. We regularly used to laugh so much driving down the main road at Hermanus that he'd drive his Volkswagen Beetle into that, that sort of culvert to the side of the road. So we had to get out and lift the front of the car to put it back on track again. The front of that Beetle became the bar so often in holidays away. So we remained close friends for a long time, and then, as you know, he immigrated to Perth, and he was there a number of years. Did very well academically there, and became ultimately an associate professor. So he was a very important part of my life, and it's amazing to think that it's 10 years ago. And the other thing that I did want to recall, funnily enough, about junior school, I know we're jumping around a bit here, but Johnny Sandler, another friend of ours who passed away, obviously, as you know, but he regularly in junior school used to bunk Hebrew, and we both lived in Rondebosch at the time, and he used to drive down to our house, and my mom used to give him afternoon tea, but he's never had any air in his bicycle tires for some reason. I remember this very distinctly. He always had to ride down on these flat bicycle tires with one of these funny curved handlebar bicycles, red bicycle, yeah. Now, he was a great guy too. You were close to him as well. Great musician. We had a lot of fun playing music. I mean, that's something we haven't actually spoken a great deal about. Yeah. I know you played in a band, we played in a band, and we played together and roundabout, and the junior battle of the bands in Maynardville. Those were great times. I think we learned a lot about music and performing and so forth at the time. Well,
absolutely.
Good memories.
I mean, Stephen Walker, Brimmy, and this was when you spoke about Stephen Brimacombe, I thought, shit, yes, I must remember to ask you about an incident, and whether it was Brimmy directly or someone else, I'm not sure, but now I can't remember what it was. It was something to do with cars.
Well, there's two. One involved Steve Brimacombe, I think, and Steve Walker. As you know, Steve Walker lived and his parents had this large house called Hoogeind in Wynberg, and we had been out somewhere. I'm not sure. I think you might have been there as well. I know Stephen Brimacombe was there, and but we came in the back way, and the Walkers often used to entertain. And so we came in the back way and went up to the first floor, and below there was a large sort of balcony area, if you like, where they used to entertain. And Stephen Brimacombe threw open the doors upstairs, not realizing there was anybody there, and burst into no walls at all, and walked forward and looked down, and all of these faces were looking up at him, and the Walkers were entertaining guests, and he had burst into the song. He had to retreat rapidly here. And also, on another occasion, I remember all of us used to enjoy taunting the cops at traffic lights in particular. And they used to get really the hell in with us. And Steve Walker had this Fiat, Mini 850 that he drove into the ground just about. But anyway, we were in this car being chased one evening by the police, and we shot past his house. I can't remember the name of the road, but
Walk.
The road past his. What? Sorry, was that?
Bushel Walk?
Yeah, I think that was the main one, but there was a road that went up to that footbridge. Do you recall? I can't remember what that was. Anyway, so Stephen swung into that road heading up towards the footbridge, and the police were hot on our tail, but they knew that there was a cul-de-sac at the end, also they thought, at the end of that road. Anyway, Stephen slowed down to, sort of giving the impression that, all right, the game's up, we're going to stop and get out now. But unknown to the cops, he had positioned his car just in front of the walkway, and all of a sudden floored it, shot up the steps, and we escaped from the police over the Wynberg footbridge with about an inch to spare on either side of the railings. I'm not sure if anybody else has driven over that footbridge in a car, but that was quite an experience. And Steve would also, he would regularly make a third lane down the middle of Edinburgh Drive and just go straight down the middle in his Mini. That to me was hair raising. So yeah, he didn't have a great sense of, well, he had a great sense of the road, but not of safety, I don't think, at the time. Yeah. Well, so Leslie and I live in Tokai, very close to the Tokai forest. Semi-retired, we run a recruitment business from home. Leslie does most of the recruiting, and I'm more the sort of the admin boy, if you like, at the back. But we share the load a bit, and it's not hugely taxing, but it's quite fun to keep one's brain active. I still am involved in theatre, although it's been hit really hard since COVID, so we're only starting to get back into it slowly. Walk the dog, try and keep fit, swim every Saturday morning if possible at Muizenberg Corner with Mickey DeVos, which we've been doing now for about 10 years or so. If we can bodyboard, we do. Just depends on the waves. Have a coffee and a chat, which is it's a really nice thing to keep up. And the point is, we do it because we can, and that's why we keep on doing it. So we've got to keep pushing ourselves to be able to do something like that. So it's, I mean, there's a mixture of things. We like to get away when we can, keep busy, keep active. Well, I mean, I think we had a great varying standard of teacher. There were some really good teachers, and there were some very average ones. The subject matter was extremely academic, but one knew that it wasn't, they didn't suddenly force it on. You could choose to go elsewhere, but there were very few alternatives at that stage to what was being offered at those types of schools. It was pretty much it. To the extent that it equipped us for the outside world, I'm not really sure. I don't think we were necessarily equipped as young men. We might have been educated to the extent of being able to do our maths and history and whatever it might be, but that doesn't necessarily make you ready at all for what is about to hit you in the world. I'm thinking today's education is far more rounded. There's a lot more depth, if you like, in education. I think the one exception was the interest that somebody like John Ince showed in people. That's probably a bit more progressive for the time. In a lot of boys' schools, that could probably be been seen as being oversensitive, and boys must grow up being firmer and harder and that kind of thing. So it's a mixed bag. I always felt, for me in any case, that the more you did at school, the more you got out of it. So I mean, I hardly ever got home from school before 6 or what have you in the evening, because I was always busy doing some form of extramural activity, probably to the detriment of academic results. But still, it was an important element for me, and I did enjoy it, and there were those opportunities. So I can't paint it as all a bad picture, but I think there could have been areas where, from I'm saying an emotional sense, there could have been more support, I think, for a lot of the boys.
Did you?
Not by a lot of not by a lot of people. I mean, we had a just reminded me of another story. But I mean, some of the teachers we had, especially the stand-in teachers like Nancy Rowland, for example, who were really way past it by the time, a lovely man. And I remember, incidentally, I think it might have been Dirk Hartford coming into E2 one afternoon just after big break and just saying, would you mind passing on to the boys that there will be no ballet this afternoon? So Nancy said, did you hear that, boys? No ballet this afternoon. I mean, he was terribly out of touch with what actually was happening and what large boys in matric might possibly be doing at a school like SACS. So, I mean, while it was funny, it was also quite sad in the sense that there was this disconnect, I think, between teaching and being human at the school, and one or two people managed to bridge that, but not that many, I don't think. I would guess that for the boys that didn't engage themselves in activities, that school would have been quite tough because it is very academic. You can be very lonely. I mean, I think you, having chatted to people and that you haven't spoken to, you've spoken to them more now than you ever did when you were at school, is a case in point. Not just you, but I think we were all like that, really. There's a lot of insular people. Those who did take part in it, you did tend to meet them in your various activities and bubbles. But I think for people who didn't involve themselves in a lot of extra things, and battled a little bit with the academic side, that could have been a very lonely experience. And I'm not sure how many, there was no proper way of helping people through that, I don't think, at the school at the time. Yeah. I think, look, if you took advantage of the extramural side, and there was a lot to do actually on that, but you had to go out and do it, and I think if you did it, then one could find enjoyment in it. But you did have to look for it, and I can imagine, as you just said, if those people who weren't that type of personality or that interested or couldn't because of various restrictions, I think life could have been quite lonely. Boys at that age aren't always particularly kind, and you can be on the outskirts of society quite easily if you're not careful.